Good morning. Today we're going to talk a little bit about millinery. Millinery is hat making. So hats are worn obviously on the head, and essentially that's the definition. Something worn on your head, right? We've got bows and scrunchies and headbands and things like that, but essentially things that are made to be worn on the head are in the domain of millinery. And as my dear friend Tim Diall, who wrote the Basic Millinery for the Stage book that I've recommended for the class, he would say anything can be a hat. As long as you can find a way to secure it to the head, basically it can be a hat. But the other thing that he says that I found very valuable is it should look like it's kissed together by angels, but you should be able to throw it against a wall and it will survive intact and look just the same as it did before you threw it. In essence, hats take a delicate hand, but you want to be very sure that you have good, strong construction, because you never know what an actor's going to do. Not only is it as a clothing, but it's also something we call a costume prop. It's something that's going to be handled. It's something that may be part of a scene as far as being handled or worn or moved about, so on and so forth. And hats can be made from many things. Typically they're made from straw or felt if you're talking about a professional hat, or fabric if you're talking about something that you're finding in fashion to wear. For theater, we utilize a number of other materials that you may or may not see in the commercial hat market. One of the main things that we use is something called millinery wire, and that's this wire here, and it's a fabric covered wire, and it comes in different weights and different gauges. And you know, the wire's inside and it's wrapped in fabric. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to then color this. It's generally sold in black or white. If you get white, that's the more versatile, because then you can paint the wire if it's going to be seen on the outside or through the hat in any way. This is essentially the hat we are making right here, this little guy. And this is a completely round. It's made to kind of perch on your hair. It's not necessarily one that's fitted. So this is a style that if you have a woman from another time period that's got a very large, high hairstyle, this would kind of rest on top. And as you see, we've got it's covered with a sheer fabric, so we can actually see the structure underneath. So ideally, if I was going to do this for stage, I would have painted that wire orange to match the fabric. But I left it white so that you guys could kind of see it and understand the structure as a reference. Typically, if you're going to make a hat for an actor, the hat, actually the inside part here would be oval. It's called a head shape oval, and it would be, because our heads aren't perfectly round, they are oval shaped. They're a little bit more narrow on the side and longer front to back. But this is a different style of hat. And there's another hat making book that's called I think it's called Hat Making for Beginners, maybe, but it has in it a basic head oval and a formula for how to size that up or down depending on the size head you're working on. One of the things we want to be aware of with hats is I like to say that every ounce on the head is like a pound on the body. I don't know if that's an actual correct correlation, but when you're wearing something on your head, it's being supported essentially by just your neck muscles and your neck. So you want to put something, you don't want to put something on an actor's head that's going to be extremely heavy. So we like to use very lightweight materials that are very sturdy. Like I said, such as millinery wire. We also often use a fabric, well, it is a fabric called buckram. Buckram has sizing in it, so it's very stiff, but it's very lightweight. It's a loosely woven fabric, not loosely, but it's a medium weave, because you can see the weave in it, but it's still fairly tight, and it has sizing to make it stiff. So it has nice body and structure to it, and then we often combine it with the wire to give it even more structure, but that keeps it nice and lightweight as opposed to using a heavier felt or straw, especially for making very large hats and things. So we're not going to do too much with the traditional hat construction. We're going to look at this wire construction. If you did get the book for Basic Millinery for the stage for reference, he has a great kind of overview of the different materials that can be used for hats and what you might want to choose for different applications. And there's a number of different projects and hats you could make in there. Like I said, we're doing the one from chapter 8, which is the wireframe hat. He did have one measurement in there that's a little off. For the brim, it says what's published is 30 inches. It's actually a 40-inch brim. I know this because he actually wrote the textbook while we were in graduate school together, and some of the hands you'll see in some of the pictures are mine because I helped to make some of the hats that were being photographed for the textbook. Another interesting, fun thing I just wanted to mention. So if we know about, I think most of us are familiar with Alice. Well, Alice Through the Looking Glass is the one I often think of, but Alice in Wonderland. And we think about the Mad Hatter and the Tea Party. That Mad Hatter idea is actually not uncommon and not far from the truth. The reality is hats tend to be sized, and we talked about sizing, we talked about fabric. That's a stiffener, essentially. They were often sized with mercury. So many hat makers spent the vast majority of their lives in closed rooms inhaling mercury vapors. And that does actually have a negative impact on your cognitive function and your brain. And they often did go a little mad. So that's not a far-fetched, that's kind of a character-based, a little bit in reality at least. All right, so just kind of in essence, hats can be made of anything. They should be very well constructed, very sturdy, but they should look together like they were put together very effortlessly. They shouldn't look clunky. They should look delicate when you look at them, but they should be very sturdy in actual application. You want to use lightweight materials so that you aren't putting too much burden of weight on the head for the actor. And you want to make sure you're using the appropriate materials to get the shape that you want for the hat you're making. Like I said, we're going to focus on wire because wire and buckram is what we use the most. We're not going to use buckram in this one because there's a lot we can learn just from working with wire. As you see, I have an array of materials here. You are going to be provided in your kit with 3 large sections of wire. Now we'll talk about the parts of the hat. The very top of the hat is the tip. The part that goes from your head up is the crown. So that's on this one, that's here. And all hats are going to have at least a crown. A visor doesn't really have a tip because it's open at the top, but it does have a crown. It's got something that goes around your head. And then this hat has a brim. So the brim is whatever extends out from the bottom edge of the crown. Okay, so the crown is the part that goes around your head, the tip is the top of the hat, and the brim is any part that extends either completely or partially out from the crown. Okay, so you'll have 2 slightly shorter pieces of wire that will become the top and bottom of your crown. And then you have a larger piece that will be the brim. You also have a series of smaller pieces, and the way this hat is constructed is, well, these smaller pieces, I'm calling them legs. So you'll use these smaller pieces to connect the top and bottom circles to create the crown, and then there's a little leg that comes out from there that helps us to create the structure for the brim. Okay, so you'll need 6 of these. So you'll have 3 circles and 6 smaller legs. Okay, I'm going to talk right now about some basic techniques on how you join this wire together, because right now we try to sew far more than we use glue, because when you sew something together, you are able to then often take it apart and use it again and again. Alterability, versatility is extremely important in costuming. So we're going to start by kind of sewing some pieces together, and then I'm going to show you how these pieces actually work. So I've got a couple of extra of my shorter pieces that I'm going to work with on a demo. Now, millinery wire, the reason why this is coiled like this is it comes to you all coiled up, right, about this size. So you're going to have to either work with that curve or you're going to have to negate that curve, okay? For the top and bottom of the crown and for the brim, obviously we're going to retain and work with the curve as it exists. For our legs, we need to straighten those out, okay? So one of the things you're going to do is you're just going to gently work with the wire and just kind of push back against that curve to try to get the wire to be straight. And it's probably not going to be perfectly straight. We just want to get it as straight as we can. The straighter the better. And I put it down to look at it because one of the things I also want to do is, while I'm straightening out the curve, I also want this to lay flat on the surface. So it's on a plane. So if it's flat, if I'm looking at it from the side, I want it to be flat this way, not kick up or sideways. There's a picture of that in the text. I will be posting, so the chapter on that we will be making this hat from, chapter 8, will be posted on Blackboard as a PDF for your reference if you did not get the textbook. So you will have that written reference as well. All right, so that's pretty straight, okay? So when we get to working with our legs, what we're going to do is we're going for this. We're going for something nice and straight. Now, you see the tools that I have here. You're going to need some needle nose pliers. So these are just pliers that have a nice, fairly narrow tip to them so that we can use those to manipulate and bend our wire. This is another pair. They're kind of curved. It's either is going to work. What you want is a pair of pliers that will come together pretty closely in a small, like in needle nose. Now this one also has a wire cutter in the base. You may want to get your own just regular wire cutter. That it might be a little stronger. This is one of our thinner, it's not the thinnest gauge that we can get it, but it is one of the thinner options as far as millinery wires. So you aren't going to need big heavy duty wire cutters, but you're going to need something that's step up from like jewelry cutters. Okay, I've got a pair of snips, I've got thread. You would be using matching thread. I'm going to be using contrasting thread so you can see the steps, and I've got a tape measure and I've got a marking utensil because there are some measurements and marks that we're going to be needing to make in this project. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is a basic join. Okay, so I'm going to cut my wire here, and when we join these two together, and this is how we're going to close our circles. So I'll be demonstrating that when I make the crown, top, bottom, and the brim, but I just want to show you the technique first, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to take the two edges of the wire and you're going to overlap them very, very close, and you're going to overlap them no more than an inch, no less than half an inch. Really about 3/4 of an inch overlap is what we're going for, because if you get it too much, if you really get an inch or more, then it's going to be hard if it has to be rounded for it to curve, and if you get less than half an inch, and half an inch is kind of pushing it, then you may not get enough of an overlap and a join to be secure. Okay, so we're kind of, so about 3/4 of an inch, half to 3/4 is ideal. Now you can use like small beading wire would be appropriate for this. When we were first making these, we did use wire to do them, but Tim discovered that thread is actually a little bit easier to work with, and it also can give you a nice strong join. Okay, so the way this works, I have my two layers together here. Okay, I'm going to take my needle and thread and wrap them around the join. I'm going to pass my needle through the two pieces of thread here just to kind of have it have something to kind of close on. And we really want to start pretty, I mean, it's okay if you're not starting, if that first loop isn't right by the end of the join, but, all right, focus here. But when we come back around, we definitely want to make sure we're at the start of that join. And right now it's just spinning. So you want to make sure it's actually wrapping. So you might have to hold that in place. And what you're going to do is we're just going to wrap our thread around both layers all the way down the length of that join. And this is actually a little farther apart than I would like. You want to really get your thread pretty close to each other. Okay, so I'm going to come down to one end, and now I'm going to go back and wrap it again all the way down the length of this join. Okay. All right, so now we've wrapped these two together. The closer you get that thread, the more secure this join is going to be. So now that we've gotten that done, we're going to go in and make a little loop so that we can then pass our needle through it to make a knot, because we have to, if you don't make that knot, if you don't secure it at the end, then everything will come undone. And it never hurts to have more than one knot. Okay, so this part is just like all of our other hand sewing enclosures. You know, you're going to start somehow with some type of loop and a knot, and you're going to finish with another one. And now we can actually even bury the tail. We can slide our pin, our needle, through those two layers. You need to shift your focus. Webcam's not shifting focus very well. There's too many details down there. So basically, I think you can see that I've got the needle passed through those layers inside the join. And then we'll just pull that through so that then the thread now comes through, and we can have and we can cut after that layer. Okay, so that's what your join looks like. That's not 100% as neat as I might like it, but it's pretty close. What I don't like is that we've got some little tufts of the ends of the wire cover sticking out there, and that's fine. I'm wondering if I pull these away and it doesn't have details down here, it might focus on that a little better. Okay, all right. Essentially what the joins should look like. There's a drawing of it in the chapter in the book that I'll be posting. All right, so that's our basic join. That's how we're going to close our circles here. The other join that we're going to need to make is when we attach our legs. Our initial join is going to be one of these, all right, because we'll bend the end of the wire and we'll overlap them and we'll attach it that way. However, when we get down to the bottom and it turns the corner, what we're going to do after we've straightened out our wire, we'll have marked where we're going to do this, but we're going to take our needle nose pliers and we're going to use that to make a 90-degree angle. Okay. So we're going to have these little L-shaped guys. Now the top and the bottom where they join, those are actually going to be 90 degrees that way. All right, so it looks a little, so if they're flat, we've got that bend and this bend is going in a different direction, okay? And the reason why is because this will attach to one here, right? That's why that little L is there. That's the big one. And you'll see this when we actually put it together. So this will attach there, and then our other one is going to attach in this little corner here. Okay, so we're going to have to figure out how to join that little corner area. So we know how to do this one. This is overlapping. This little corner is a little different. So the way we'll do that is we're going to, so that other wire is just going to lay in that little corner, in that little bend, okay? And then we're going to have to wrap our thread around, oh, I need to put a knot in it. And again, there's also an illustration of this in that chapter in the book, which will be posted on Blackboard. It's much easier to do than it is easy to do while showing someone how to do it. All right, so basically we're taking our thread and we're going across. I'm trying to get my needle through the two pieces of thread like I did the first time. Okay, and we're just going to make a little X across this guy, right? So we're wrapping it in an X shape. That's one diagonal. Now we'll come to the other side, and this is what makes it the X, because now we're wrapping on both sides. All right, so that's what you do. You're just crisscrossing over from one side to the other. So we're wrapping that direction and then coming the opposite diagonal. And then just like all of our others, we make a loop, pass the needle through, make a knot. Hopefully you won't have a big loop sticking out like I do for some reason. Okay, and then there's no, you can't really bury the tail on this one. So these are the two joins that we will be using for this project. We have our regular overlapping join, and then we have our little bent corner join. Okay, so those are the two ways that we'll be using to attach these wires together. All right, so that's our little tutorial. And next we're going to move on to, we're going to make our circles, okay? There's going to be a fair amount of repetition here. All right, I don't need any of my needle nose for now. For right now, all I'm going to need is my needle and thread, my snips, and my pieces of wire. This isn't going to be quite long enough thread, so let me start with a new one. That's a little longer than I need, but hey, there'll be less time between now and when I have to do another one. Unless I get a big knot, you know. All right. Now, according to the chapter, we want these we want the crown to be a circumference of 25 inches. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure starting at the end of this wire, and I'm just going to take my tape measure and move it around. The wire is inside there until I get to 25 inches. All right. Now when I'm at 25 inches, I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to mark where that is. All right, so now I have a mark at 25 inches. Now you see, I've got far more than, 3/4 of an inch past that mark. So I'm going to need to take my wire cutters. I'm going to need to cut that down. So if you want to measure 3/4 of an inch right here, that'd be perfect. And you want to be a little careful because when you do snip this, sometimes that kind of goes flying. We got really lucky there. It just kind of dropped off. All right, so now I've trimmed it down. I've got my 25-inch mark, and now I'm going to take the initial end of the wire and line it up on that 25-inch mark, and that's going to give me a 25-inch circumference circle. And so now it's a circle, it's not a straight line, but now I'm going to do that overlapping join that I demonstrated just a minute ago. Just want to get it started. And it's a little bit more of a challenge because what was really nice about that other join is that being a straight line, it was much easier to kind of go around. Now we've got to go in and out of this circle. Again, you want your thread fairly close together and you want to wrap it very tightly. You want these two layers to essentially become one. And for some reason, I didn't start wrapping, it's just spinning that initial part. So let me get a good actual wrap started. You can't pin this, you just have to hold it in place as you go. And I know you can't really see it because I'm holding it down as I go, but that's our wire getting wrapped. I'm just wanting to keep it nice and tight, which is why I'm keeping my hand on it. I won't have to do that as much when I go back the other way, so you'll be able to see that way a little better. All right, now I want to wrap until I get past that end. All right, and now I'm going to go back the other way. And one of the reasons why we like thread instead of that beading wire is because if I go back and forth, 2 or 3 times with my thread, it's still a fairly small amount. You're not really adding weight. You're not really adding any bulk. A little bit of bulk, but not the same as you would if you were using a small wire. All right, now I've gone the length of that join, right? So now what I want to do is I want to tie it off at the end. Come up and just, you can grab the thread you were just using. You can get it through some of the fabric cover. Just as long as you make a pass through so that you can make a loop. I seem to have collapsed one side of that loop, so I'm going to do that again. All right. Through. Make a loop, make sure we've got 2 threads on that loop. Pass the needle through. Now I've got a knot. Okay. I want to get that knot nice and tight. I'm going to do one more. All right, so now I've gotten that knotted off. There's our little join. Now we'll pass our needle through all that wrapping to more or less bury the tail. This is a good place where a thimble might come in handy. That's just a little cover to put over your finger so that when if you have to push the needle through something thick, it gives you some resistance that's not your flesh, so it's not going to poke through. All right, I've buried the tail in there. And now we're going to trim. Okay, so we'll do the same thing with the other circle and our brim circle. I'm not going to make you watch both of those. So the next step that I'll be demonstrating is how to make the legs and how to attach them.